They have not gone. Okay. All right, welcome.
Who's on?
That's me.
Oh.
Am I still?
It sounds like it's
No.
coming from one of the TV.
Yeah, is everybody's speaker off?
Right now.
Hello? All right, got it. Mark's the one this time, huh? All right, so welcome everybody to our, what today is today? Tuesday, February 20th, City Council meeting. We are in the chambers, we're experiencing some internet issues, so luckily we still have Zoom up. We'll be able to do that. And so I'll be relying quite heavily on our meeting host for anybody who's joining us remotely. So we're going to go ahead and get tonight started with our workshop discussion on reviewing and updating the city council rules of procedure. We do this every couple years when we did it during COVID, when technology changed and just when things change. And I know Councilmember Kurtz had brought up the question about, a year or so ago, we had changed to trying to get everything under the consent agenda. And when we started out with, hey, let us know before the end of the day, Friday, if you want to move anything under action items. And then there was a meeting where apparently it was decided, oh, I'll put them on everything under consent agenda. And at the meeting that will be make some motions to move things out of there. So it sounds like there needs to be some discussion on that. And then I know Mark's got a couple other things for us to review. So Annie, did you want to start off with your your question about, and it wouldn't require any change to the rules of procedure unless we want to call that out specifically, because we already have a consent agenda and general business section already established.
Okay. So I think, like I sort of introduced this at the last meeting. So the specific example that maybe you want to just make sure everybody's on the same page with agenda creation. There were a whole bunch of items on last week's, 2 weeks ago's consent agenda. And there were a couple that I was interested in moving into general business because I had some questions. And we get the draft agenda that's sent out, and I thought that would be a good time to just say, hey, I have a question, I want to move those down. And Mark let me know that the process that they've been operating under was that everything goes into the consent agenda and then it's moved down. So I went back and forth a little bit because it feels like what's written in here says that a council member can move those things. And to me, that means that I could move that before the meeting without having to have motions and seconds and an agenda that doesn't make sense, in my opinion, anymore. So I think that's what I wanted to discuss specific to that was, do you guys think it's good practice for us to be able to, when the draft comes out, be able to say, hey, I have questions about these things and I'd like them to be in general business? Or do you guys prefer that we do that in an open meeting with motions, seconds, and then an amended agenda?
Yeah, and just a reminder, so that was the original intent. And then I think I must have been at one of my out of town meetings when the council discussed putting everything under consent and then moving it. So I wasn't there. So it's all calling everybody. So guys can have the discussion and decide. Councilmember Spencer.
I thought that was kind of the purpose of sending out the draft agenda, was so that if there were any changes we wanted to see made at that time, we could make those movements so that we aren't tying up time at the actual meeting. So I would be in favor of being able to do that. If a council member wants to move something from consent agenda to the, general business, then seems like a good idea to me.
Councilmember Van Orman.
Well, as it's currently set, you would be able to do that. And the reason why we did the consent agenda and moving everything into it is to have a faster meeting.
Right.
Because most of it is already explained within our packet. But I think it's been working well as far as pulling things out that we want to highlight to make sure that the public knows, that we've got a new person on the commission or so. Yeah, I agree.
And just a reminder, the items on the consent agenda are ones that won't have a discussion. That they're meant to be things that are quick. There's no questions about it. There aren't, you're not going through them. You do approve everything under the consent agenda at once. And then those things that have the questions are under the action items, just to make sure everybody's clear on that.
And
Okay.
so if I can, it looks like Councilmember Ball has a question, so you go first and then I'll follow.
No, I was just gonna say I concur with Annie because I've had to pull some things out at both the last two meetings because I did have questions. So I think it would be more expedient to be able to pull them out of the draft agenda, say, I would like this to be under general business because I have questions, you know, rather than, as she said, go through the, you know, motion to move
Right.
it and second and so on. So.
Yeah, doesn't matter to me either way. I just know we started out one way, then we changed, and now it feels like we're going back, but whatever you guys are happy with, it works for me. Go ahead, Annie.
And I think when we had the discussion about putting things on the consent agenda, I think what we had been doing was still motioning and seconding everything on this consent agenda instead of.
Consent, yeah, but everything was under action items, really, basically, except for the vouchers and things like that.
But when I was looking through the rules of procedure, it specifically outlines what things should be in the consent agenda and which things should be outside of it. And so that was one thing I wanted to ask about. Because one thing that's been put in the consent agenda, but we do seem to pull out are commission appointments. And so maybe that would be one thing we would want to put in our rules and procedures as an amendment so that we, if people want that out there, if we're going to, so if we're talking about commissions and people, I think our practice has been to do that in the general business so that if they're here, we can talk to them.
Yep.
But if it's already put in the consent agenda, it just seems like we're not going to give any critical thought to their appointment.
Sure. So we can, as we work through this and there may be other changes, we can make a note to add that specifically as something that will go, any appointment confirmations will go under under the action items. Is there anything else in general that you guys would want to see consistently? Like this example in the action items versus the consent agenda? Go
I
ahead.
don't think anything that we would do, even if it's moved into or out of the consent agenda during the draft portion, precludes us from doing it the
Right,
night of
exactly.
the city council.
Yeah.
So I think we're covered.
Yeah, because from my standpoint, we want to try to get ahead of any of it, obviously. So, so if we're doing the appointment confirmations, and I would also say, obviously, anything that's a spend, that's not budgeted, or if it's over budget, that would automatically go into an action item for discussion. Open for any other ideas, but it sounds like we've got consensus to, if you guys want to move something out of the consent agenda into action items to, I'd say let Mark and Kelsey know and copy me. So as I'm preparing for the meeting, I know what's where. Then we'll get the final on Friday, but Councilmember Kennedy.
Question, my question would be to Mark and staff, is that going to be disadvantage for you guys at the last minute to suddenly a council member, we've got 8 individuals that can say we want this moved? It suddenly gives more involvement from your staff?
So not really. I mean, if we're talking about a process by which an individual council member looking and responding to the draft agenda sees something that is listed as a consent item that they want to move into general business, as far as staff's concerned, if the council consensus is that can be moved prior to the meeting through email, we're comfortable with that. We just wanted to make sure that was discussed and consensus was provided for that process so that it didn't seem that staff was making arbitrary decisions to move things between sections to the extent that that was possible to do. And so the other thing I would say is, as you're discussing what items generally should be in consent and what items generally should be in the action item section, If there are some objective standards that you want to apply, so say, for example, a limit of dollars or something like that to a contract or to an expenditure, that would be helpful as well, so that if it was above that line, we would put it in one and below another. If it's everything, that's fine too. As long as we put that in and write that into the procedures, because right now what it says is that essentially it calls them items which are of a routine and non-controversial nature, which may include, but are not limited to the following: meeting minutes, payroll, and claims. Those are the only thing that are scheduled to be put in consent. That, in my mind, that means everything else is on general business. And so that's how we were treating it until we had the discussion where the consensus was, well, no, let's shift it all into consent.
Right.
And so if we want to follow what's written right now in the current rules of procedure, we're perfectly fine with that. We just want to make sure that the council consensus follows what's written in the rules.
I'm comfortable with that as long as it doesn't add additional last minute changes from the staff. I know in years past, we're pretty good about getting the agenda out to council on Thursday. And a lot of times now it comes out later on Friday. And the difficulty there is having actual time to get in and research some of the stuff. And I know in the past, one of the concerns has been, has come from staff, is that it takes more time for staff if the last minute a council member suddenly says, well, I want to add this, or I want to change this. So as long as you guys are okay with it, I got no problem.
Yeah, from an agenda making perspective, the time it takes to change the agenda really isn't an issue. What we're attempting to do is to get the draft agenda out on the Tuesday, the Wednesday, if not the Tuesday of our previous council review meeting. And so you would get a first look at it latest sometime Wednesday.
Right.
And then you would be able to make all of those requests for changes before it's published on the Friday. That really is the intent. And so from a Wednesday to Friday timeframe, changing an item from consent to general business, that's just a matter of taking it from one section and putting it into another. So from a time perspective on staff, that's not material.
Okay, good. I'm comfortable with that. Thank you.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Mark, you asked for some, like, anything else that would be specifically delineated in consent. And one of the things that I was wondering about is one of the things that I have liked on the consent is things that are budgeted. Because I don't think we have had as many questions about those. If they're in the budget, they're in the capital facilities fund, we've approved them 8 different ways, and this is a part of achieving that. And so that would be something I would be interested in having initially listed on there, and then if anybody has questions, something that can be pulled out. But I don't know what everybody else's thoughts are.
To clarify, does that mean budgeted regardless of amount?
Does everybody else think?
I mean, I'm in agreement if
We
it's
bought-
not budgeted.
Yeah, we
it
bought
needs to
police
be.
cars last week. We bought a whole bunch of stuff last week and it was all in consent.
Yeah.
Because it was all budgeted and I was fine with that. And if I would have had questions, I would have asked for them to be pulled out, but.
And remember too, if you have a question that you think might be fairly simple, shoot it to Mark or it would be, shoot it to Mark and copy me. We'll get the answer real quick and we'll get the question and the answer back out to the entire council. Because that might, it could be a really simple question that we can answer ahead of time. Okay, it sounds like we've got some direction. Good, Mark?
Yes.
Okay.
Are there any other
Oh.
preferences?
Just 2 comments on this. One, I'm fine with being able to change it ahead of time as well. I guess my question, kind of spinning off of what Mike was just asking. It's going to be incumbent on the council not to be all emailing Kelsey at 3 o'clock on Tuesday asking for changes. So I guess my question on that point is, should we put a deadline whereby we want to make sure that if we have a request to move something, that Kelsey has it? And part of the reason for that, in addition to not making her life difficult, is in my point of view is the public notice of it as well. If we're going to be moving things around on the agenda and we're going to be posting something, I mean, I would hate to have a council member email at noon on Tuesday and then another council member email at 2 on Tuesday and then another one at 4 on, and it just makes it a lot more difficult.
I think originally we had asked for, I forgot what time it was on the Friday, based on the draft agenda.
I think it was noon, wasn't it?
Right.
I'm pretty sure it was noon, and so we're comfortable with that. If a request comes in prior to noon on Friday, then we would include it in what's published in the agenda. If it was beyond that or after that, it would need to be done as an action
item.
during
Okay.
a agenda review. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other comments or questions? Okay. All right, Mark, did you want to step through what you've got up there?
Sure, Michael, you can skip the first couple of slides and go, skip that one. Skip that one. We'll start here. And so we'll skip the next one as well. But one of the sections that we wanted to throw out as a discussion item and get some feedback from council on. And Kelsey distributed the current rules of procedure. So hopefully you have that in front of you because this one's going to be hard to read on the screen. It's a captured image, but it's essentially just to highlight the fact that we've got a section in the rules of procedure 1.5 that deals with remote attendance. And we wanted to just go over that, provide council members with the opportunity to provide any changes in preference with this respective provision in the rules.
So originally this focused on when our technology was worse, and well, I know Councilmember Van Orman remembers that, and we would try to call in for an important subject and we'd have the speakerphone over here and nobody could hear each other and it was just a mess. And then obviously when COVID came along, we had to switch gears. So we made some updates with regards to, instead of saying remote attendance, because it used to say like phone attendance thing, we did a lot of cleanup on that. But I think we've gotten away from, the rare occasion piece of this. Family stuff comes up, work stuff comes up. We all get that. But I think we need to pay closer attention to this, especially in the part where, it does, call out examples of situations where remote attendance would not be appropriate, include, but are not limited to quasi judicial hearings, other public hearings where maps, well, obviously that we can show maps and whatnot, on Zoom, non-hearing agenda items, which depend substantially on visual aids and or graphic presentations. So I really kind of key in on the quasi judicial hearings part of that. So I didn't know if anybody had any questions about that.
I do.
Yeah, sure.
The question I have is that in the past, COVID taught us one thing, is that we can conduct business over the internet and quite effectively. I think we've stumbled our way through that. Were there situations where we had a quasi decision that had to come up that if we were doing it online, that it was a problem? Has that been an issue in the past?
Because we've had.
My recollection is no.
Okay.
There hasn't been issue from the standpoint of voting, if that's ultimately making decisions of the council. I can't recall off the top of my head where that would be an issue. And honestly, the intent behind all of 1.5, and I think the changes that were happening to this were kind of on the fly because
Right.
during COVID,
Right.
we were still trying to figure out Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all those, what that was going to look like. And it was an alternative, but we were kind of waiting to see how that would unfold after COVID and its use and whatnot. So this was an attempt to kind of use what was there before, which was basically telephone, and what was going on with Zoom and the idea of coming back later and revising this. I think most, if not all of this would look completely different
Yeah.
in revising it now for the council, which would be in-person attendance or remote attendance, because the remote attendance has essentially made like you're in person. So from the standpoint of being able to conduct the business of the city, you're able to do that differently than before, where if you're on the phone, you may not be able to hear, or you can't hear the person that's a council member who's not present.
And we've had our technology challenges earlier this year with some of that. I know you had a hard time hearing some. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing I think is really shown is that the ability to have all of our council members involved in every meeting has been very, very good. because of the technology that we now have. So
Just wanted to touch
support it.
on-
I can see where we do need some changes though.
Yep, Councilmember Kurtz and then Councilmember Cargill.
That's what I was gonna say, is that I think that maybe we're a little bit too limited in the remote attendance, because I was not able to be here last time because of my husband's travel schedule and kids and, but I wanted to be at the meeting
Right.
and I want to participate. And there were other people, you were not present, but you were present, and so was
Yeah,
Mark. And so
right.
I feel like I would like to spend some time, or have some, grace to do that, to be able to attend when we're other places, because I do want to be engaged in meetings, but sometimes it's hard to be here.
Councilmember Cargill?
Well, I was just gonna say, when was the last time we had a meeting where someone brought in a map to show us?
I know,
Or
it
a
wasn't yet.
display board? I'm
Right.
not even sure what a display board is.
Oh.
Like that guy?
Whiteboard.
I mean, it seems to me that every presentation that is given by
Yeah.
one of the directors or any hearing we're doing, it's all PowerPoint, which means it's gonna be on the screen,
Yep.
which means it's gonna be in front of, someone participating online will probably be able to see it better than we can.
Could be. Yep.
So,
So do we
from
want-
my perspective, I would just say maybe chopping those last two bullet points could also be helpful.
Well, and do we want to go back to A, where it says the rare occasion?
Mhm.
What do we want to change that and what to?
Mayor, if I may, here's what I would suggest at the council. So I can rework this section for it. And, you could do it from the standpoint of not be appropriate. It could be where the council would say it would be appropriate in these situations to, desire to have in public or in-person attendance, but not necessarily a requirement. Because like I said, you can still conduct business to the extent that the person is available and able to participate. If they're not able to participate, then they wouldn't vote. They wouldn't be part of the
Right.
consideration of, what is before the council at that particular time. So if you want me to do that, I'm happy to do that and, kind of simplify it, quite frankly, from the standpoint of, how that attendance looks.
That sounds great. I know Councilmember Spencer had his hand up.
Yeah, I think, to kind of go off of, what Sean said is we could really just simplify the whole thing down to the gold standard is in person, that's what we're encouraged to do. But if you're not able to do that, I don't see why we would need to have all of these different bullet points as to what the circumstances. As long as we have a connection and we were able to participate in the meeting, I don't think any of this is really relevant anymore.
Great. Well, and that's kind of why we like to do this every couple of years, because things do change.
Well, I'd like to go ahead and put in just kind of a what if. We do have on March 5th, the Community Engagement Commission, that I'm sure we're going to be using that one. So, so there are times that, and I really believe that, especially going to homeowners association meetings, where you're hearing somebody on the telephone, or you're not getting, the person on the view to see exactly what their facial body language is everything.
Yep.
So I agree. The in-person is preferable.
Well, and maybe we make it a requirement to have, unless you're, I know we've all gone through the sicknesses, right, over the last 4 years. Sometimes you just don't want the camera on you. You don't feel good enough to get out of bed to come, but you feel good enough to attend. But when possible, to have our cameras, we're not there.
I was just gonna say one more thing. I mean, this is obviously a rare circumstance, and I don't think anybody on the council would do this. But there is the potential for someone to take advantage of this. So if we don't have some provision or something in there that talks about in person, I mean, there is the potential for a future council member to come in and say, well, I'll just attend all of them from my house.
Yeah, and I've heard those exact
Yeah.
stories at AWC meetings.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if that means maybe we add some sort of,
You could do it similar to what you do with non-attendance, which is after 3,
yeah,
something like that, where, attending by Zoom, something consecutively or something like that. I mean, that's an option as well.
Councilmember Kennedy.
Thank you, ma'am. I assume it'd be if after 3 of not being approved. or not?
Well, I think the
Understand.
answer, I think what Chris was going for is if you just decided, for the next 6 months, or 3 months, I'm going to attend all the meetings by Zoom. And so the intent would be, what I was getting at was, if you not attending, if you attend 3 meetings by, Zoom, you need to be in person, or only 2 in a certain period of time, something like that to work it so that council members aren't at their home or, in New Mexico or wherever the case may be for a period of time attending the meetings.
And there are extenuating circumstances. I know, when Councilmember Langford, was on council and he had some family things going on. And so he was attending remotely from Florida, but I'm pretty sure we all understand those things and would give somebody the appropriate grace.
And you can have it too, where you can excuse. You can,
Right.
the council can excuse the individual too. I mean, if that situation, right, they're gonna be gone for a couple months because of a family matter or whatever the situation may be, you can excuse the rule relative to somebody's attendance.
Yeah, we do have to be careful of that though, because this is one thing that came up at our AWC meeting a couple weeks ago, is that 3 unexcused in a row is actually an RCW.
Correct.
So we need to be, but I don't think we've rarely had anybody in my 14 years around who's been unexcused. And usually what it does is it starts out unexcused because emergencies happen. I've had to even walk out of a meeting one night because of something like that. And so, if then you follow up, they, okay, well, was it a car accident, was it in the emergency room, whatever, then I would say, I would hope the council would then change that to go back and retroactively make that an excused absence. Councilmember Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing I found interesting, the last 2 meetings I was on Zoom, and the thing became very apparent to me being on Zoom is that how easy it is to hear if you're on Zoom. And in this room, it's not as easy because a couple council members are very soft spoken or they don't get close enough to the mic. And it's difficult sometimes to follow the conversation. But on Zoom, it was amazing. I heard everything, which maybe is not so good at sometimes.
Boy, I think you had the advantage of the headphones too. That's, I like that.
All I can say is it's a really good idea that, Mike and I are right across so he can see the lips move.
And I'll share my.
Did you say
hearing
something?
aids. All right, well, it sounds like we'll do some cleanup on that, and get that a little bit
Very
more relevant to 2024.
So before we move on from this one, I'm gonna ask Sean a question. I don't know if this is a rules of procedure issue as much as it is a staff kind of enforcement issue, but can we require that any material that comes before the council be made electronic so that we can have it as part of the record? So for example, to eliminate the possibility of someone walking up with a display board, although you may still want to do that, you would need to also replicate it electronically so it can be distributed amongst the council.
So are you asking if someone wanted to present something to the council, whomever it may be, staff or otherwise, it would all be in electronic format?
Yes.
I mean, you can, well, I suppose I'd say twofold, just from a general perspective, you can certainly require participants or presenters to provide everything to the city electronically.
Right.
Outside, internally, then that becomes a staff question. I assume that answer is yes, because the staff can, present it that way. Do you want to make it a rule? Sure, you could. Do you want to be that inflexible if something comes up that you can't do it electronically? I don't know the answer to that, but that would be, a reason maybe not to do it. But if you wanted to put it, council wants that as part of the rule, that anything presented to the council would need to be in electronic format, then sure.
Or provided afterwards.
I mean, I don't have an issue with it. I mean, there's not a problem with putting it in the rules. I'm just saying sometimes you have the rules and then you have the practical effect of trying to meet the rules, and you're doing that, but not necessarily able to do it all the time, depending upon the factual circumstances.
There would obviously have to be some kind of exception clause, but the example that I'm thinking of is the map that's behind Councilmember Van Orman. I can't produce that
Right.
Print without having an electronic file. Right. So if I'm going to present that, I'm going to be able, I can bring that in and I can show it to everybody here, but I should also be able to submit it electronically so that it can be part of the record in electronic form.
Yes, I mean, the answer to that is yes, if you want to do that. Again, I just think that's an issue of, do you want it as a rule versus the practical side of it? I don't know the answer to that. You guys will know that better from a day-to-day perspective, but if you wanted that to be in their rules and the council wanted that, sure, you could put something like that in there.
And so that really goes back to the question about if I'm remote and I'm not in the chamber and I'm able to follow along because I have everything and I can see everything, it helps from a decision-making standpoint, be able to follow along and have the confidence that I'm seeing what everybody else
Right.
is seeing. So
Go ahead. Oh, I think, did you have?
Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to comment regarding that. As long as we can make some sort of provision that if there is something taking place in chambers, or like when we were doing brainstorming and you had all those sheets that you're ripping off and things, as long as we have the ability to capture that in the video, because the individual watching from Zoom is going to be able to see that, but we got to make sure that we have the camera, positioned in a way that they can see that and participate. And then, of course, it's captured in the record, in the video record.
Councilmember Cargill.
I was just gonna say, I'm fine with that, with one exception. I don't think we should require that for the public testimony. Because,
That's
obviously,
burdensome.
yeah, it would make it very difficult for the public to produce something ahead of time. If they want to hand something out to us and we're here, great. And if you're not here, then too bad, I guess.
Or we can always ask them, hey, is there any chance you can provide
Yeah.
us the file within a couple days or whatever?
I agree, and I'll qualify it by saying I was talking about our business agenda
Sure. Okay.
versus everything else, but
Got it.
things you will be voting on during the meeting to make a decision on is what I'm limiting that to.
All right. Did you have next one on here? Or do we want to, since it's only 6:30-ish, we can kind of scroll through the rest of the rules?
Sure,
Can I
Mike,
ask
look,
one more,
Yeah,
and maybe
sure.
you're gonna bring this up at the next one, Mark. 1.6 has basically the same type of language in it on remote attendance.
Yeah.
It talks about being able to hear the discussion, being able to see
Right.
and present. So that may need to be cleaned up as well.
I think they go together.
right. And we will make sure that, because there's some cascading connections that we'll have to make on some of these as well. So we'll keep that in mind as we go through. Michael, if you go to skip the next slide and go to the one that is titled 10.3. 4.1 order of business is what we just discussed with respect to the agenda. And so I'm going to skip that since we already covered it. 10.3 is really dealing with the timing of the agenda. We touched on this a little bit, but the reason I wanted to bring it back up here is because we had previously in a prior workshop discussion talked about establishing a 72-hour rule. And so this would be a section that if you want to move forward with that understanding, we would need to modify to account for the 72 hours versus the 5 p.m. Friday. Just wanted to point that out. If we want to continue to go that direction, we would still preserve the 1 p.m. on Friday because that helps us to meet this noon deadline that we talked about earlier. But that 5 p.m. Friday for distribution would technically be shifted forward to 72 hours before the meeting.
Mark, so if I'm reading this correctly, it would just be then the sentence that starts agendas will be distributed. You can just delete by 5 p.m. Friday and say within 72 hours of the meeting or something to that effect. I mean, that's
At least 72 hours in
Sure.
advance of the meeting, yes.
right.
So is there anything in here that says it's got to be business hours?
No, so the 72 hours would be clock hours unless you want to do account for some other period. We made the recommendation of 72 hours to account for the buffer of weekends and things like that.
Well, I was just thinking, I mean, I guess it comes down to what our definition of notice is in the 72 hours, whether we're talking about 72 business hours or 72 hours period, because if we're talking about 72 hours period, then we're covered with the Friday portion, because that would include the weekend and then Monday and Tuesday.
It would. And so then we would need to define what clock we are
Yeah.
using, and we can do that. I think it would be easier just to use clock hours and just set it at a place where we're comfortable hitting it.
Okay.
And say at least 72 hours, because if we continue to publish by 5 p.m. on Friday, we're going to hit that anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Theoretically, you'd have 72 hours prior to the 7 o'clock meeting, right? So you'd be able to come back on Saturday by 7 o'clock theoretically is the 72 hours, right? And generally it's 72 hours would be regular clock hours unless you make the distinction that it's a business day or business hours or whatever the extent of what that is. So you would have essentially an additional day to do it by Saturday rather than doing it by Friday.
There's one thing, and I can't remember where it is in here. I'm pretty sure we do, but just a reminder to everybody that the deadline to get anything into Kelsey, say a proclamation or things like that, is noon on Wednesday. Ordinance requests, resolutions, those kind of things. We request longer time because Sean obviously needs to go through it and probably already, at noon on a Wednesday before the meeting is a bit short time, that we do run into that now and then. So just be aware, because like we got, Kelsey and I got a request from the Future Business Leaders of America. Last week was like their national recognition week. And so we wrote her back like, hey, we'd be happy to honor that, the week after, but then we didn't hear from her. I would have loved to have gotten that on there, but we have to make sure we're not cramming everything in at the last minute. So noon on Wednesday. Yeah.
On 10.2, can we put in the time of noon on the Friday before the meeting just to formalize that so everybody's clear?
Sure.
And then I would like to see the what you just talked about put somewhere in
Yeah.
here so it's
I
formalized.
thought
who
we
the-
had it in here somewhere, but I'll double check. I think what else? We got in here. I don't think much else has changed. I know we do, getting through this document when we went through it a couple years ago, and I know Councilmember Kennedy probably remembers, we went through iteration after iteration, trying. Yeah, and Councilmember Kurtz too, just trying to not be redundant, but cover everything. So it's tough. And, maybe it's time if we, if it's okay with you guys to take a couple extra weeks, come back with something that may be a little bit more succinct. Because this mirrors very closely, I think, what was put in originally. We've just kind of been building on it over the years. So maybe it's time to take the scissors to it and just make it a little bit more clear. But
Yeah, in 10.1, there was some language referencing about halfway down. A link to the agenda packet will be available at the library and a hard copy. Not sure exactly what it means to have a link to the agenda
I
packet
wonder
at the
if we're
library.
doing-
So
Thank you.
doesn't seem necessary to have that link. in
that
there.
came from a citizen request a couple years ago. For people who might not have access so that they could go to the library and the library could get them hooked up on the computer and they could bring up the agenda. And if they wanted certain pages printed, the library would print it for them. We can probably make that a little bit more clear.
Yeah, I mean, we're publishing it on the website so
Right.
they can access the city site
Yeah.
on a library computer. So anyway.
Mayor,
Yes.
if I may, I do recall when that came up here some years ago. The challenge was, I think one of the individuals came forward on that. Not everybody is computer savvy to go online and check that information. So it was looked at that there should be able to have a hard copy here where at least they can pick it up. That way a citizen can't say that, you've taken care of everybody else, but I'm not computer savvy. I have no way of getting that. So that's why, if I remember correctly, that was in there. And I think we should continue to honor that to some degree.
But, and I think that's fine to have a copy available printed, but it's saying specifically have a link to the
Right.
agenda packet at the library.
Again, we can probably clarify that, that you can, the library can help you access the documents through their computers there or something like that. We can work on that. Councilmember Kurtz, did you have your hand up? No. Oh, sorry. I think I saw your hand go back up.
Yeah, I was just gonna, there were two parts here that caught my attention when I was reading through this last week. One was 11.1, suspension of the rules. Typically, when there's a request to have the rules suspended, it usually takes a supermajority. And I know we just have a majority here in the language here. So I'm not saying we need to change that. I'm just saying that might be something we might want to consider, saying if we're going to suspend any of this, it's got to be more than just a majority of the council. The second question I had was regarding 9.7. I think 9.7 needs to be clarified because it says right now that the mayor pro tem could be removed from office by a vote of 4 of the council members. when I read that, I was trying to think, okay, are they talking removed from the office of mayor pro tem? And then they continue to sit on the council? Or is it completely removed from the council?
I think it's from the position, that
Yeah,
we've never dealt with this. I think it was
Right.
in the original and it's never come up.
so that was one thing, and there was one other.
Let me interject there for a
Yeah.
minute.
Sure.
It would be removal of mayor pro tem. There's statutory requirements for removing a council member.
Right.
So it's just for mayor
Okay.
pro tem.
I'm sure I'll find the other one. I'm not remembering which one it was right now, but I can come back to it.
Is there a typo on that, Mayor Pro
Yeah.
Tem on?
There
number
is.
7?
Turn.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm like, am I new contacts? Yeah.
On which section?
On 9.7, Mayor, it's Mayor Pro Turn in there.
Oh.
ERN.
That was just my eyeballs.
Oh,
What number?
9.7,
9.7.
just a
we
typo.
put the R and the N next to each other to make it look like.
It looked like an M, yeah.
Right.
I remember what it was now, 9.3. It seems to me, I mean, we've gone through this process like 4 times or 5 times since I came on the council, and I'm sure we're gonna have more in the future. It seems to me we're not following this one at all. Talking about, how we're gonna go through and we're gonna submit the questions to them, and they're gonna be allowed 2 minutes to respond, and then closing comments. I mean, we do it differently each time that we have a council opening. So I'm not sure if we just need to take those specifics out and just say, it shall be up to the council to determine what the process is gonna be, or if we want to get more specific there and then hold to it.
Well, I think the intent of it, because I've been through a lot of interviews on both sides myself. It got to the point where we were asking, every time we had an interview process, we were asking the same questions, that we did the last round. And so people were able to anticipate that. And
Yep.
so we kind of changed it. And now every time we kind of go through it and get kind of morph the questions a little bit, as long as they're the same for every candidate. It may not be the same from this round of interviews to 1-2 years from now, but at least everybody's getting the same question. Because they used to be quite different. Anybody else? Yep, Councilor.
Can I jump ahead to 4.1P?
You're actually
Can I-
going backwards.
Yeah.
Well, I was just a little slow.
That's okay, 4.1.
Emergency ordinances, probably a more of a answer from Sean on this. Emergency ordinances require a vote of majority plus 1. Is there a specific reason why it has to be a supermajority?
I believe it's statutory. The
That's- okay.
statute requires it.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I may, Chris, the one on suspension of the rules. The reason why I think a lot of times the majority is when it comes up is if you had a super majority and you didn't have enough council members and a particular topic came up that may have been a timing issue or maybe an emergency type situation, or what the circumstances may be, you didn't want to have a super majority because you couldn't get there related to the topic. And so I think the premise has been, because it doesn't happen a lot unless you're pushing something forward that needs to be done on a timing or similar situation. So that's the thought process behind a majority versus a super majority, to make sure that you're not, the intent behind the rules is not to preclude the council from being able to do their business, right? The intent of a meeting is to do your business. So if you had a super majority, there could be situations where you couldn't get there in order to do it.
Anybody have anything else? I guess I would say if something else comes up as we're working through these, just get the notes to Mark and I and we'll work with Sean and whoever else we need to pull in to try to make this a little bit easier to navigate and get some updates made. All right, so it is 6:40.
Mayor.
Yes.
Mike-
Oh,
Mike, did
sorry, go ahead.
I have one either jumping ahead or behind. And on our agenda, when special presentations. This has come up in the past where I feel personally that we should be setting a time frame on individuals that come in and give us a presentation. Because I know that in the past, we've said, you've got 20 minutes or something like that, and it's difficult. All of us have sat in meetings where it's run 30 minutes or more. and the redundance comes in and in and in, you know, and it gets to the point, there's a tipping. When you say enough is enough.
Yes, yeah. We
So if could
typically
set
ask
something-
10 minutes plus 5 minutes for questions. Sometimes, you know, and what do you do? You know, say, you know, Visit Spokane's up here later and they go over, you know, we'll try to cut them off, but we also don't want to be rude. So, well, it's kind of a feel for things, but we do give them guidelines and it's that 10 minutes plus
Yeah.
5.
I realize sometimes they'll come in with a special presentation, which does take time.
Yeah.
So we can know what that time is,
Yeah.
so we're not looking at our watch.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. All right. So I guess, again, it was 6:45. We'll take a 15-minute break and we'll be back at 7 PM for our regular meeting. Get my,
Oh, it's,
oh, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Tuesday, February 20th City Council meeting at 7 o'clock. We are here live in chambers and on Zoom. I will make a note for those dialing in on Zoom. I cannot see you. We do have a meeting host. We're having some Wi-Fi access issues here with our laptops, but our meeting host and other staff members are hardwired, so they're going to get us through this. I guess we'll start with the invocation. I didn't ask anybody to do it, so I'll do it and we'll follow up with the Pledge of Allegiance. Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us together tonight. Thank you for keeping all of us healthy. Thank you so much for the first responders that have been such a part of my life in the last year. They've come and done their duty with my family and have been successful. And I really thank them for that. And I thank all the rest of the first responders that put their lives in danger every day. Please guide us as we work through some of the things that we're going to be discussing today, and that the conversation remains respectful and courteous, and that we are successful in proceeding with the city's business. Amen. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's 7:01. We'll go ahead with roll call. Councilmember Van Orman. Here. Councilmember Kurtz.
present.
Councilmember Ball.
I'm here.
Mayor Pro Tem Cargill.
Chris is here. Sorry, I was reading something.
Councilmember Spencer.
Present.
Councilmember Kennedy.
Present.
And we did have a call from Councilmember Dunn. He is recovering from some ickies, so he is resting up tonight, and hopefully we'll be back in full force at our next meeting. So I would ask if we have a motion to excuse Councilmember Dunn.
I'll move to excuse Councilmember Dunn.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Councilmember Kennedy. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have an excusal. So we are up to agenda approval. And so I had sent a couple of requests to Mayor Pro Tem for some amendments. So we were supposed to have GSI here. Gary from GSI has come down with COVID as well. So we'll have a motion in just a minute to move the 2 GSI items to the next meeting. And with Councilmember Dunn being one of the 2 prime sponsors for the city council committees, we'll also ask approval to move the city council committee's workshop discussion to the next meeting.
So-
Mayor Pro Tem?
Mayor, I'll make a motion to remove items 7B, 9A, and 11B from the agenda.
Second.
Any questions?
7B, 9A, and 11B.
The GSI
Oh,
agreement.
Mhm.
All right, does anybody have any questions? All right, not hearing any. Yeah, we had a second.
Okay.
Councilman Kurtz. Those in favor of approving these 3 amendments, 7B, 9A, and 11B, to move to the next meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, are there any other requests for agenda amendments? Not seeing any? I'll take a motion to approve the amended agenda.
Make a motion to approve the amended agenda.
Second.
We have a second from Councilmember Spencer. Are those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes 6-0. We are up to citizen comments. So as usual, if you're here in chambers, we have our little half yellow sheets by the door over there. If you'd like to make a comment, please fill it out and you can get it to Kyle at the end of the table, who'll get it to me. And if you are online and you'd like to make a comment, please send a note to our meeting host and he'll get my attention and we'll call on you. Just to remind you of 3 minutes. You can speak on any topic. It's truly a comment session. If there's something we need to follow up with you on, we'll make sure one of the staff members does that. So first off, we have Tom Salberg. Welcome back.
Tom Solberg, Liberty Lake River District, and welcome back to you, Mayor, and congratulations on going back to college for your Women's Leadership Certificate. I was celebrating for you. Hopefully that will work out for you as well. Also, I wanted to just talk about a couple of things. The council's familiar with the Spokane Regional Transportation Council and that we have Lisa Key on the Technical Advisory Committee, myself on the regular advisory committee, and the mayor is on the staff. The bosses, to which we're going to give them a report that I'm giving you right now, which is that we have a steering committee that is setting out the goals for the SRTC, and it's for a specific, it's called a safety action plan, but it's getting our hands on some grant money. And in doing that, it's going to be working towards the goals of Target Zero. And I'm not going to go into that, but you're going to be hearing more about it. The mayor's going to give you some reports once we figure out what the agenda is to get you and the timeline. But I think that for you, for us, it means the potential for some transportation monies to help us with pedestrian and bicycle transportation issues and projects. And that might include some sidewalks, Chris, that we both want to have. That money will specifically be going towards where people are being killed and serious injuries. And we have our fair share here as well. And the other thing, just briefly, is COVID is over. And I really liked the discussion that we had today, that you had today. And isn't it kind of time that we start having some people that are either business people or people in the community come back and put on those presentations that we're talking about? And they don't have to be 10 minutes. You can say in some of them 5 minutes, but Annie and I met someone who, a business, and I won't give the name of it right now, but they do couples and family therapy here in Liberty Lake. And they needed help getting a grant to expand their business to specifically addressing young people, the causes of some of the homelessness and the chemical dependency and mental health issues that we're all concerned about. I'd love to hear from people like that. This morning, Ben Small was on, I see it.
Okay.
29th. Ben Small was on and it reminded me that we haven't heard from Central Valley School District for a while. I know Dan usually has, but you know, John Parker was excellent at the farmer's market, and Jesse is a hoot, the principal at Ridgeline. So if we could hear from some of those, and there's some other businesses that have come to the attention of the Planning Commission too. I think everybody would benefit from that. So thank you.
Great.
3 seconds.
Thanks for your comments. Do we have anybody else here in person? Do we have anybody online? Okay, just remember, we'll have a chance for citizen comments later in the meeting as well. So we'll go ahead and move on to announcements, proclamations and special presentations. And tonight we have Visit Spokane. They should be, again, I can't see on Zoom. So is Rose Noble on Zoom?
Rose Noble is not on Zoom.
Mark, did you happen to hear any?
I have Robin B. You got
No, she's community engagement. We'll have a, so Rose isn't,
I've not heard of I can't make it message.
No.
And so I'm not sure.
well, we may be setting a record tonight. I don't have her cell number. Mark, do you happen to have it? If you can get online to your email?
Give me a second.
I'm gonna say if it's okay with the council, if we move to number 8 while we're trying to get a hold of Rose and then come back to 7? Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead. Start with reports and inquiries. We'll start with city council reports. Does anybody have anything earth-shattering or interesting to share with us since our last meeting? Councilmember Kurtz.
It's not earth shattering. But I'm a part of the Balance Calendar Committee for the Central Valley School District. So they're talking about a balanced calendar, which in some people would know that as year-round schools. So we've been meeting since January, and by March 25th, we'll make a recommendation to the school board about whether a balanced calendar is something that we feel like would fit in the school district. So the last meeting we had last Thursday, we meet again next Thursday. They had 4 different proposals that they put out with different calendars. So they had 4 different calendars. They had it compared with the current calendar to show where breaks were. They've been looking a lot about where their absences for teachers and where their high absences for students are to try to figure out when natural breaks would make sense. So there were 4 different calendars they put out. One of them, again, just kind of an idea so people can like think on it a little bit. It would shorten the top 3 had like a 9-week summer break and then some different breaks throughout the year. And then the last one that they had on there was more of like a true year-round-ish school with breaks, but a 4-day school week, similar to what's happening in Idaho. So I think they wanted everybody to kind of ponder those for a little bit, but they're interesting to think about from the students' perspective, from retention of staff, from trying to get kids available to go on vacations with parents, which I think has been one of the things that they said post-COVID, parents are taking kids on vacations in the middle of the year. So how to match with families' lives, sports, all of those things too. So it's been interesting to hear from teachers and administrators and parents and professionals that are working with students.
Great. Thanks for being on the committee. We look forward to hearing more as it comes. Appreciate that. Anybody else? Mark, were you able to get through?
So I've texted, waiting for a response.
Okay, super. Thank you. All right, move on to the mayor's report. I said my trip for the AWC City Action Days got cut in half. So Mark can do more of that reporting. The first day, and I think I mentioned, I've gone to so many of the Jurassic Parliament and McFarland's, running council meetings, and you see this in comments and everything, but every time they go through a session like that, and it was somebody else this time, and there was basically, do's and don'ts. And I can put together a better summary, but things to, the one thing that, we all do is to have to remember, and I think everybody does a pretty good job of it, to not put staff on the spot in a meeting, no surprises. We can always take, anything like that offline or, and I usually, a lot of times during our agenda meetings, I'll prep some of the staff, like, I will be prepared for this question. But, it's best to, keep that positive relationship with the staff and to not put them on the spot. But the other thing is this was very interesting, and some of you may have seen a recent case. Don't use emojis in your emails. There is a recent case where, and it involved a contract, and somebody replied to an email about the contract with a thumbs up. And one party took that as acceptance of the contract, when the other one is basically, yeah, got it. And the courts were finding in favor, as when I read about it, in the person who interpreted it as acceptance of the contract. So be very careful with your emojis, especially when we get into our council dialogue and with any citizens that we're emailing with. So I never would have thought of that. So I'll put some notes. Thanks. I'll put some notes together on the rest, but it was always a very, very great time. We ended up not having dinner with Representative Schmidt. She was under the weather, but we did have a chance to talk with Leonard Christian during the reception on Wednesday night. And then I know Mark was able to have the meeting that we had planned on with Senator Patton the next day. So I guess I'm done with my report. So we'll move over to Mark and the city administrator report. And if you want to add anything to that, Mark.
Sure. I'll try to qualify some of those things and add some additional context. And just to point out, I haven't received a response yet, so we're still waiting there. If you look at the city administrator's report, we've got only one item on the events and reminders section, which is the 2024 legislature. And we're obviously in a 60-day session. We are tomorrow hitting the last day deadline for committee reports to be read in the opposite house. And so there's going to be a lot of things that shake loose tomorrow that are maybe not known right now, but just a couple of items that I wanted to point out that we've kind of been discussing even at a high level over the last several weeks, and some of the things that pertain specifically to our legislative priorities that council adopted a while back. And so one of the first things, if you've been keeping track of this, is the bill that was at the top of AWC's priority list, which was essentially the property tax cap bill. At least in this legislature, seems to be dead. It did not, it went down after coming out of Ways and Means. And so seemingly not going to be resurrected in this session. And so looking beyond that, there are several other, what I will call tax-related bills that are still moving toward some resolution, whether that ends up being passage and getting to the governor's desk. And one of the most significant ones is some changes to the TIF legislation that potentially could have an impact on the district that is mostly in Liberty Lake. And so thankfully, through some discussion and some revision of an original version of that bill, it was less impactful, or the current version of it is less impactful to potentially to the city than the original version. There were all kinds of provisions in there that would have required us to go through clearinghouses and different things with respect to some of the project proposals. And so this one is still alive. We're monitoring it. But as it currently stands, it will not have, even if it passes, a material impact on the TIF district that is in Liberty Lake. And so we'll just have to keep our eye on that. Another collection of things that are moving at different speeds through different houses are things that are focused on improving law enforcement retention and recruitment. We've talked a lot about that. One of them is to allow for part-time and flexible work hours for police. This is more of a pension tweaking bill to allow people that have retired to come back into the workforce and work without affecting their past pension or their pension that's been accrued. Another bill is allowing DACA recipients to serve in law enforcement. And then another is looking at passing law enforcement training bills, which would shift some of the cost burdens that are presently on local governments exclusively to the state. And so there are all kinds of things that are swirling out there with respect to law enforcement. We're keeping our eye on all of those. But as the session continues to unfold, we'll get a much clearer picture after we get into next week. One of the things I wanted to point out is that yesterday, I believe it was, is some of the Senate budget proposals were made on particularly capital items. And as you would expect, the Gray and Oregon Road fire relief items are at the top of the list. And so we see a lot of new information about those, but there are a lot of other things on there that relate to Spokane County. And then I think finally of note, the 6 initiatives that are working their way through the legislature. It looks like, based on some press releases that have come out, that 3 of those are going to get hearings and 3 will not. And so we'll have to see what that looks like as those approach the end of the session. We'll find out whether any of them, and it looks like at least 3 of them will get hearings. And so as it stands now, it looks like the 3 that will get hearings are, my website reset, so give me a second here. So these are the bills, I'm sorry, the initiatives. And I've lost that headline, sorry.
Police pursuits, the school curriculum, and then I can't remember the third.
So-
one.
State income tax.
So not getting the public hearings are to repeal the capital gains tax initiative, to repeal Climate Commitment Act, and to allow more people to opt out of the state's long-term care. Those are not getting hearings. So the other ones are getting hearings. And so
And the effect of that, Mark, is that the ones not getting hearings are going to be on the ballot. We know for sure. Or am I doing that backwards?
So that's right.
that's an almost guarantee at this point. Yes. And so that's kind of a snapshot of the legislative session at this point. You know, obviously these things change on sometimes a minute by minute basis. We'll continue to keep you informed as some of these particularly those that affect our legislative priorities change. And as we get closer to the end of the session, we'll have a much more clearer picture. And so are there any questions before we move on? Yes, ma'am.
So, yeah, I have a question. So I did go to the town hall, I guess it's called, with Schmidt the other morning with Suzanne Schmidt the other morning. So she said, okay, the police pursuit one, the state income tax and parental rights are the ones getting hearings. So you're saying the ones that aren't getting hearings are going to be on the ballot?
So the reason that they've called hearings is to try to get more information so that they can decide whether or not they're going to take some kind of action, which would be to propose some kind of alternative
Mhm.
potentially.
Okay,
The ones that they're not calling hearings on, you would assume that they have no desire to take any alternative action. And so those are most likely to show up on the ballot.
gotcha.
If I was betting, I would
Mhm.
say all 6 are going to show up on the ballot, but
Mm.
I lose bets all the time. So don't
Okay.
take, yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Oh, and just real quick, GSI is having a legislative wrap up on March 28th. So if you check their website, the information's on there. So Kelsey's out sick, but when she gets back, if you're interested in going to that, it's a breakfast meeting. I think 8 to 9:30, something like that on the 28th at the Spokane Club downtown. So those are always great to go to and hear some feedback on the session and whatnot. So if you want to attend that, just let Kelsey know. She can get you signed up.
Yeah, that's a great
What was
point.
the date on that?
March 28th. It's a Thursday.
Those are always very informative. So I would encourage you to attend one of those if you can. And so seeing no other questions on that, we'll move to item number 2, which is department reports. Those have been distributed. And so now is your opportunity to ask department directors questions about any of those reports.
Are you guys getting them? Okay. Check it.
So moving on, we've got now the 2023 Q4, essentially year-end financial report. And so I'll invite Kyle to provide that briefing for you.
Thank you, Mark. Mayor, council. Yeah, can you guys hear me? There we go. That's better. Okay, so next slide, please, Michael. So we'll go through kind of what you guys are accustomed to seeing with revenues and expenses and kind of where we landed for 2023. And so obviously our major revenue drivers for the general fund will have broken out here. In 2023, we collected 2.48 million for property tax. You'll notice kind of right off the bat that didn't meet our annual budgeted appropriation. And so digging a little bit deeper, we got our TIF report on the 18th, and we do have a little bit more of a carve out in the last couple of years with the TIF and lift with the TIF and lift portion with the construction that is taking place in the River District. And so I've updated the forecast to account for that. And so we can anticipate obviously tighter numbers with, revenue source like property tax. We should have that within 99 or 101%. So we'll get that buttoned up. Another point to note with that as well is we have 300,000 in bank capacity. And so that is the result of 3 straight years of 0% property tax increase. And then previously, I don't know the exact stats, but I think in the last 15 years, it's happened maybe 5 or 6 times total. So that compounds and that adds up. And so this is very much different than what you might know as a levy lid lift. That takes voter approval. This is a budgetary and council action that if we are ever discussing or reevaluating services versus revenue. This is a simple council action by ordinance to recapture these revenues. In addition to that, we've talked a little bit about the TIF and lift. That is going to expire in 2034. And we immediately recapture all of that revenue that is being diverted to the TIF and lift back into the general fund at that time as well. So we have these built-in buffers with what has otherwise been, a fantastic year. We'll get into the rest of that a little bit later, revenue-wise for the city. And then moving along, so sales and use tax, you can see we continue to outperform expectations, and I feel like I'm constantly underestimating, and I don't want to do that. But we just continue to kind of outperform any of the metrics and expectations that we have, which is fantastic. And so that's a best source of revenue that city can realize, because you are spreading that over every single person that travels into the city and not just the residents. And so that is optimal. And to see that grow and grow and grow, we're obviously less reliant on property tax, which is a sole burden on our residents. And so having that shortfall in property tax is a direct savings to the city taxpayers. And so we have more than made up sales and use tax with that. So that is a zero concern. And so moving on, permits and planning. This is a best guess of the service delivery we anticipate the planning department providing over that year, because we have a lot of cost recovery. Building permits are cost recovery to a large extent, but that's their major revenue driver as well. We have plan reviews and things like that as well that are pure cost recovery. But again, as we get into kind of what revenue sources fund what departments and what services, the planning department is self-sufficient in the fees that they charge. Next slide, please, Michael. So I think, as everybody's aware, we've been talking about this TIF and lift reimbursement for the better part of a year, I would say. And we submitted this reimbursement to the county in July of last year. But like with anything, it was a massive document. So that takes time for them to review all of our submittals to make sure that it meets the intent of the TIF and is allowable for reimbursement. And so we batted that back and forth. We still thought all along we'd get it in October, and we'd get it in November, and then I swore we'd get it in December. And of course, it shows up on January 3rd. So we don't have it on our books for 2023. That's fine. It looks wonky when you have a $3.3 million reimbursement that wasn't budgeted for in the year that it is accepted. And so that said, it's accounted for. You can see obviously the substantial ending balance that we have for January 2024. And we'll get into that on the next slide. But some of the other ones that came in right as we anticipated are these state and county shared revenues. So you have public safety measures, criminal justice sales tax. So these are carve outs of the 6.5% state sales tax and the 2.3% county tax that are dispersed to municipalities kind of on a pro rata population basis. And then marijuana and liquor excise tax are also included in the general fund. Those hit their marks. We are paying for our flock safety through marijuana excise tax revenues. So, and then other revenues, these are kind of one-offs that we can't plan for. The Harvard Roundabout Interfund loan, that was back in 2014, and that was a little bit of a research project. So the general fund loaned the Harvard Road Mitigation Fund the funds to do that, and then it just, for whatever happened, never got paid back. So we rectified that last year. So investment interest, I was looking back through some historical data. 2020 in the general fund, we received about $18,000 in investment interest for the entire year. And I think we all know what interest rates look like back then. And so we received $230,000 last year in investment interest. So that is a very elastic source of revenue, but it is very nice when we have it. So and then just charges for services, miscellaneous revenue, just things that kind of come up that you can't plan for, sales of capital assets if we surplus a PD vehicle or any equipment like that. Next slide, please, Michael. So this is a snapshot you're all familiar with. I've taken streets out of this because we're just focused on general fund for now. But to a large part, we hit all of our marks. That last one is really the one we want to look at. That's our total operating revenue for 2023. And we outpaced it by the better part of $2 million. And so what obviously the TIF and LIF reimbursement isn't included on here as well. I didn't include it on the budget side as well, because that thrown it off. So, but as you can see, on the revenue side, really just good news all around to report. So next slide, please, Michael. So on the expense side, we've all seen this one as well. So this one is another just kind of testament to the departments that we have really staying within their means and what council has allotted for them. And we see, 96, 92, 90, so 67 in parks. So we had a couple of provisions that weren't realized in 2023 in parks. So we were planning on designing City Hall parking lot reconfiguration, and that did not happen last year. And then we also had the PD and library window replacement that was slated for 2023 that did not happen. So you see a little bit of a delta there at 67. There was two major projects to account for why only 67% of the allocation was spent for park facility and facilities. And so the rest were tracking right where they need to be. Total operating for the year for all departments at 87%. If we could hit that every single year, we'd be
Better
great.
than we already are.
Exactly. So next slide, please, Michael. A little bit more on expenditures. So we budgeted 14.4 million last year. We spent 12.5 all told. And so these are little snapshots kind of throughout. So January 1st of 2022, up here I have December 31st, same thing. December 31st of 2023, really consistent there, 5.49, 5.39. I had to include month end January. We're at 8.18 ending January with the TIF and LIF reimbursement. So, and so you can see some historical balances there as well. 2019, we ended the year with 2.8 million, 2020, 5.7, 6.3, 5.4. So that gives you a little bit of a historical perspective on where we're landing at the end of each year in the general fund. Next slide, please. So pivoting over into streets, this is going to be a transition year for us, and we'll get a little bit into that later. But our utility tax collection far kind of outpaced what we had planned for strictly on the electric side. So electric, there was some rate increases that I was not aware of that really kind of drove that revenue. And so the rest fell right where they were supposed to. And so we are transitioning out of that, obviously into TBD sales tax, but continuing with motor vehicle fuel tax. That one fluctuates. You'll see motor vehicle fuel tax collection at 96. Some years you'll even maybe see it at 88. Some you'll see it at 117. It's purely just based on, fluctuation in travel and, lane miles year to year. And so, so street expenses fell right really where general fund it, 88% of annual budget. And so, we had a couple of snow events, but we weren't like overly hammered. And so that always kind of allows for that buffer at the end of the year in streets. And so looking into what we were discussing on this transition year. So we have the TBD sales tax that was approved back in November. The Department of Revenue will begin that tax in April. And so we were hoping to get that obviously for January 1st. They implement January 1st, April 1st. So the start of each quarter is when they implement a new tax. And so we will see that first tax disbursement in June of 2024. And so what we'll do is we will plan the reduction in the utility tax revenue to coincide with that. So, and then obviously we have a build out of the Public Works Department. We have a department director that's going to be on board hopefully in the next, month or 2 months. And then they will start building out kind of the department and their vision and what they bring to you for what the future need is going to look like will shape what this department, what the revenues ultimately will look like to provide the service that this department director and then you, mayor, and council sees as the path forward for this department. So next slide, please. So real estate excise tax, so we have two. We have what the statutes call REIT 1 and 2. The 1/4% on the sale of any real property within the city. For our purposes, REIT 1 and 2 are essentially identical. There are some administrative restrictions on REIT 2 that aren't on REIT 1. But for our purposes and in terms of the capital facilities plan, we essentially treat them the same. So for this exercise, they're combined. And so as you can see, we hit our mark for REIT collection in 2023. We completed the Public Works building, the Liberty Lake Road slip lane. And so this was another one with the TIF and LIF reimbursement. A portion of the expense covered for the Kramer overpass was provided by the REIT 1 fund. And so our full reimbursement from the TIF and LIF was 4.6. 3.3 went to the general fund, and then 1.3 went to the REIT 1 fund. So you can see we ended the year with a combined balance of 2.92 million. We're going to end January with a combined balance of 4.37. So this is a great place to be. This is one of those funds where it really is beneficial to stack this balance when we have it, because as we'll get into the next couple of years in this first round of infrastructure replacement, we aren't going to cover it all by ourselves, but having a match when we go out for funding with TIB and any of these other state agencies is really going to score well when we can say we can put, 10 or 15 or 20% down for them to cover the rest. That will give us a leg up when we're going for these major infrastructure replacements and repairs. And so this is one, I wouldn't say the same for general fund. General fund is more like a checking account. And so that one, if we have, $15 million in the general fund, we need to reevaluate our revenues, right? And so REIT is a different animal. And so we have to be able to prepare for the future with REIT and know that we are covered with these major infrastructure projects that we know are coming down the pipe. So that said, looking ahead, we do have, as we just discussed, Appleway Mission, Sprague Road overlays. So all told, that's going to be, I believe, 1.8 million between those three. Orchard Park Storage Building, I think that's 200,000. And then obviously our trailhead debt service from now until we can pay that off. So next slide, please. Golf operations. So you can see, from a revenue and expense perspective, it was a 1-for-1. And so you can see there's a little bit of a skew when you look, okay, well, we collected more than we thought on the revenue side, and we didn't spend as much on the expense side. And so on the expense side, we had a fleet of golf carts that we ordered in 2022. And they were supposed to be here, I think, towards the end of the summer. And as we all know, with supply chain issues for the last couple of years, we are anticipating those hopefully in April, so we can get a full year's use out of those. And those are going to be a really major revenue driver, because currently we run out of golf carts on a busy day before noon, and we can never really catch up. And so these things will pay for themselves, I think, in less than 3 years, and we'll have them for 8 or 10. And so these are a fantastic source of revenue and a great business model for the golf course. And so with that, you'll see our ending balance there in 2023 is 500,000. I would say 400,000 of that is earmarked for debt repayment. So we have the ongoing poles and netting at the driving range, that installation. And so that was funded through the general fund. We don't want to commingle those funds any more than we have to. And so we're just going to leave this in the ending golf balance until the poles and netting are completed. And as soon as those are complete, we can essentially turn that into a debt repayment vehicle and throw everything that we can at debt prepayment once the poles and netting are done. So next slide, please. So these are some of the others with substantial activity. A lot of our funds that you won't see here didn't have substantial activity in 2023. There's cyclical building contingency, library capital at some point. You're going to see on here with the design of the new library building, police capital, any major activity there. We'll report that when those activities take place. But so getting into parks and arts, 36,000, tourism promotion, we spent 141,000. Restricted reserve is exactly where we need it to be. And so usually we'd have to tweak that maybe just a little bit to get to our 15% of operating revenues every year. But with the performance of our funds in our interest-bearing accounts, we haven't had to touch that at all. So, and as we touched on a little bit before, the trailhead improvements. So once the poles and netting are done, that's going to transition into a debt repayment vehicle. And then just a little bit on 410, 411 stormwater aquifer protection. That is, so right now they're planning funds and street sweeping funds essentially. So it's aquifer protection and stormwater swale cleaning. That will all get absorbed into the Public Works Department at that time. So with that, to put a little bow on this, next slide, please. 2023 went largely according to plan. And so it's not always going to be like that. So we got to enjoy these times where things go as we plan. And so I'm happy to report city's in a good place right now. So any questions?
What's this 120 restricted reserve? What exactly is that?
So that was created by ordinance, and I'm not sure exactly when, but it was I think it was on the heels of the economic downturn in 2008 and
No, it was not.
Earlier.
It was actually started when we first started the city.
So it's essentially a rainy day fund. So if revenues are such that all of a sudden we are anticipating a major operating deficit, we can do a couple of different things. We can reduce service for a period of time. We can dip into the restricted reserve, and that's all guided and policed by our financial policies.
Yeah, it takes council action.
Correct. Yep.
To dip into that. And we haven't, even during the
Even
downturn.
during the downturn, we were able to leave it intact.
Excellent.
I just have two comments,
Yeah.
Kyle, not questions. One, I love seeing the revenue and expenses be at 12.4 and 12.5. Right on. Perfect. I think the other comment I wanted to make is that the utility tax, as you mentioned on, I think it was like slide 6 or whatever, came in 118% above. And the sales tax came in 126% above. I think that proves that we could have, probably know where I'm going with this. We could have done away with the utility tax entirely and we would still be in a good position. Now, you don't have to comment on that. I know. I don't want to put you in a position where you
We'll revisit
have to
it,
comment
yeah.
on it, but hopefully we can circle back to that. In
Certainly.
the
Yeah.
coming years.
Yep.
Yep.
Excellent.
Councilman Kennedy.
Thank you for not doing a thumbs up on that. Cal, very good report. I always look forward to giving reports. I think you're very thorough and easy to understand. 3 questions. 2 of them you might not be able to answer now, but sometime in the future would be great. As I look at the revenue and sales tax, offhand, do you happen to know the percentage that we get from auto and RV sales
I
versus
don't.
retail?
So I'll follow up with another
Great.
report in probably next year. So we finalized the NAICS revenue in March. So March will be the last year essentially of 2023's income. And I can pull the reports that give us 2023 data in full in March. So
Yeah, that information is always, I think,
Yeah.
very important for council and citizens to realize that. Second question is on general fund revenue streams, that this is something maybe you could look at in the future.
Yeah.
I'd be curious if we could look at the city of our size for our revenue that comes in compared to other cities of similar size. And the reason where I'm going with that is that we are a city that, because we have land, we are really flush in many ways. We are so fortunate compared to cities that have been around for 50 or 100 years, and they've already hit build out, or they have no businesses coming in, and expenses go up, but they have no revenue coming up. At some point, the tipping scale will hit us. Now, I don't think that's going to happen for some years down the road, but eventually it will happen. So if we could look at those type of numbers, therefore the council, elected officials, and citizens will realize that we are really in good shape, but we have to be aware of what's happening down the road. We have to be conscientious of money that we obligate now for certain items will have an ongoing expense as they go on. on it. So I think future or something like that.
Yep.
And the last, which always had a question on is golf operations, you know. Tickled to death, the golf is finally coming along. It's outstanding on it. The golf is unique because it's in a fund different than anything else within the city. And part of the rules at the state level is that when we have a special fund of that, and I can't remember what it's called offhand. I should have it.
Enterprise
in-
fund. Yeah.
What is it?
Special revenue fund,
Yeah.
right?
Enterprise.
Enterprise fund.
Enterprise fund.
Yeah.
Yeah. Enterprise fund is very, very simple to understand, in my opinion. It simply says that if you have an enterprise fund, what you're doing is you're taking the citizens' money and you're investing it in a business. And if you're doing that, you have to charge revenue sufficient to cover your expenses. So when I see in the years past and now showing we have revenue 1.1, expenses 1.1, I seriously question that. For the
Right.
simple reason that we're never in a position to have any retained earnings for polls, remodel the buildings, things of that sort there. And the way that the enterprise fund works, you have to have revenue to do that. If not, you have to make special consideration. And I don't think the city has done that. We have greatest intentions that it's an asset of the city. It's a great asset of the city. But it is one that is set up that we can't take the same attitude as that, well, we treat it as we would a park, because it doesn't work that way by law. So it would be interesting to see what our true expenses are when it comes down to leasehold improvements, things of that sort there. Because when we were first looking at doing something with the golf course over there, it was in the tune of over $8 million. We had spent from general fund to pay for something that had never was able to pay for itself. I've never had a challenge that we subsidize that. Never have had a challenge, as long as the citizens understand what they're paying for.
If I may jump in, the revenues from the golf course are paying for the bond,
Yeah, partial. So the,
Yeah.
our REIT one
right? And that was
will
the
cover
plan.
part of it, but yeah, so golf
Yeah.
operations will cover a
Yeah.
portion of that as
Yeah.
well.
And that's what that's the discussion I'd like to have with people. For the most part, the people who are using the facility are the ones paying for the bond. The REIT funds are from real estate excise taxes, where there's no property tax going toward it. There's no sales tax going toward it. It's two specific areas where that money is coming from. So it's not coming out of, our residents' pockets with regards to property tax, and it's not coming out of sales tax.
Well, with all due respect, if over the years we pay $2.5 million for that, and we put another $8 or $10 million over in the revenue that brings in, that has to come from somewhere, and that comes from general fund. So we put more into it than we're getting out for what we're charging. And
That's
once
not
again,
the
I want
case,
to
but we can
reiterate,
take
I don't
that
have a
off.
challenge with that, as long as the citizens realize that there's expenses and then there's true revenue that comes in.
And that's not the case, but we can have a separate meeting on that if you'd like.
Very good. Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. So moving on, we have Chief Simmons, who's going to give you some information about an agreement that we're in the process of striking with an outfit called Data Pilot to do some backing up and extracting data from mobile and digital devices. So Chief, take it away.
Thank you, Mark. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So I think I mentioned before that one of my top priorities for this year is to find grant funding and funding assistance for purchasing needed resources for the PD. Well, we recently acquired assistance funding the purchase of a mobile forensic tool and the training of our relevant department personnel in the use of this tool. As Mark said, the funding is from a company called Data Pilot, and that's also the name of the forensic tool. Now, Data Pilot gives our investigators the ability to acquire and to analyze and to report on forensic data that is found in cell phones and tablets. The company is gracious enough to be funding just under half of our intended purchase, which is $12,375. That's the total. So they're funding, I think it's $6,095 if I'm not mistaken. And the PD is funding approximately, I think, $6,280. So in essence, the company is providing the software and the forensic training at no cost to the PD, and we're purchasing the license. There is a little bit of ongoing cost for that. The first year, I believe, is $1,000 after this year, and then the second year is $2,000 each subsequent year, or it may be the other way around. I'll have to double check. But after some research and discussion with our detectives and our leadership team, I felt that the data pilot purchase is important and takes precedence over one particular other budgeted item that we budgeted for this year. So I'm reallocating those funds from the previous planned purchase to make the purchase of the data pilot. Data pilot is providing this service to help law enforcement agencies like ours, that helps us build cases and increase our conviction rates. And this gives us quick access and training on a forensic tool that's currently being used by a plethora of agencies throughout the United States, excuse me. Now, currently our detectives use the Spokane County Sheriff's Office Forensic Unit and any other available trained law enforcement personnel to conduct our forensic analysis on cell phones and tablets. Our detectives currently transport cell phones and tablets that contain digital evidence to the public safety building 3 to 4 times a week to have them forensically analyzed. Now I did the math, that's about 36 miles and 50 to 60 minutes travel time round trip. And that doesn't include standing by for the forensic analysis if you need a quick examination. Now, I know from experience as a detective that there's times where this could be extremely important and time is important, such as in cases of abductions and endangered persons. And this gives us the ability to conduct forensic analysis in-house at the PD. So this tool will save time, money, and most importantly, it'll improve our investigative abilities as a department. And I'm willing to take any questions that you may have.
Any questions? Councilmember Van Orman.
Chief, what was the thing again that you were going to redirect from?
So we were looking at purchasing another speed trailer. We have one already, so we were going to purchase another. Our attention was somewhat divided. This is twofold here. So we found the data pilot, which I feel is it takes priority as far as from an investigative standpoint and a department standpoint over the speed trailer. The speed trailer, I just also decided to hold off on because we are actually looking at some other technology that will probably be a little more useful to the city and to the community other than a speed trailer. And it's not that much more expensive. And specifically, I'm talking about speed camera technology, especially within our school zones. And so I'm setting up currently, I've been in contact with a rep from the same company that we purchased our speed trailer from. And we're going to talk about looking at maybe potentially getting some cameras placed throughout the city, specifically starting in our school zones to make sure that our children are safe and that people slow down. And so again, twofold, data pilot and looking at something that's similar to the speed trailer, but that'll be a lot more useful to us as a department, the community as a whole.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I don't see any. Thanks for your resourcefulness as always.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Chief. All right, moving on to the last item on my report, just to give you a quick update on the 2024 Community Satisfaction Survey. Where we are with this, and I'm not going to go back to the very beginning and retread on all of the territory, but just wanted to give you a quick synopsis of the last month or so. On January 22nd, we sent out survey invitations to select households within the city. And then on January 29th, we followed that up with the survey distribution with the return envelopes. Where we are right now is we are at the place where we, on Monday, the 26th, which is this coming Monday, we're going to send out our first reminder round. And so where we are, and we don't want to talk in specifics to kind of talk about specific demographic breakdowns of the responses, but we're at about a 20% response rate. That's obviously less than we would like to see. And so we want to see now what the first round of reminders does to boost that up. And so all of this through the reminder distribution is all budgeted and well within the expenditure threshold that we've talked about. And so looking forward, what we would expect is to make a determination roughly coinciding with March 20th, which is the next Community Engagement Commission meeting after tomorrow's. Once we get to March 20th and we're able to say, okay, we've sent the reminder and here's what our response rate is. What next action do we want to take, if any? And so we will be prepared at that point to have that discussion at community engagement and then come back and continue to brief council as we attempt to get the response rate up to something that we're comfortable with. And then obviously, once that occurs, we'll be reporting results. So at this point, that's the update on the community satisfaction survey, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
How many do we have back at this point?
About 20%,
Great.
a little more than 20%.
And we were expecting, our goal was how many back, percentage back?
Sorry. Always like to get 100%. But
Realistically.
yeah, but well, there's the
Statistically
point, the
significant
point at
number.
which, yeah, the point at which we can come back to you and report statistically significant results is about 80%.
All right.
That's a big number.
It is.
Yeah, it's a big number.
So
All
if
right.
we put Kyle in charge, we can get 126%.
Right.
46%.
Well, so that's going to be the next stage is, yeah, absolutely. So that concludes my report. Mayor.
Okay,
Very
great.
good.
Next, Parks and Art, Nancy, welcome.
Well, as usual, Parks and Arts, so we've been busy. We do have a full commission now, along with two adjuncts and students, so things are moving right along. We're super excited about the Smarty Board sign project, which you can see on the monitors there. To improve inclusive communication in our parks. We're gonna try the first one at Orchard Park, and we're just going back and forth with the company now. We've given them the logo. And we're just making sure the board is going to fit our needs, and we should be able to get it installed no later than summer. So we're super excited about that. And if that works out, then we'll look at installing them in all parks. So that'll be our test one. We thought Orchard Park would be good because we have so much going on in that one area with the playground and the splash pad. Next slide. There's been a lot of questions at Pavilion Park about the history of the park that are inspired by the mural. People see that and they want to know more. And so we've been talking about and are researching installing an historic viewpoint information center, kind of up where the flagpole is. So it'd be up above, you'd be looking down at the pavilion. And we're working with the Historical Society on what that might look like. That is in our budget for this year. So that's one of our big, strong pushes right now, so we can get that done. And we'll give details about the structure, which has historic significance in itself. From days gone by, like over 100 years ago, it looks like a structure that we used to have. And then the mural details, which we have had the questions on, and people are interested because it's such a beautiful piece of art. So we're excited about that, and we'll keep you posted as we move forward. We're looking at the trailhead art walls. I think you recall that when I was here before, there's two of them. One as you enter the trailhead building to go in the pro shop, and then the other as you go in the event entrance to go in where you would go in the restaurant or the meeting room. And we've had a presentation from Rosh Schneidmiller about possibly using some historical pictures. He didn't have any old golf pictures though, but he did have some old pictures of the trailhead grounds, which was kind of interesting. I learned a lot. It was very informative. We also had a presentation by our student commissioner, Allison. She has been working with the art teacher at Ridgeline High School, and she gave some examples of what student art might look like. And we do have two opportunities, and we're also looking at some photography, possibly a citizen photography display that might be revolving. So we have a lot of ideas, but we haven't really narrowed it down yet. We're still in our research part. And Mayor, we haven't forgot about the beam. We're now thinking library renovation.
Oh, there
They're
you
going
go.
to need a bench in the library. So
Perfect.
we're gonna get that somewhere. We just
Great.
need a big enough space. And then next slide. finally, we're going good on communication within our group. We've done kind of a review of our purpose and why we were established and making sure that we think we know we're on the same page. But we want to get maybe more interaction and feedback with city council. And we were hoping that Mark might be able to schedule a workshop, maybe just once a year, preferably before we would have to turn in our budget for the next year as we're looking at projects and getting some feedback from council and making sure we're all on the same page so that we're not just two, satellites working separately. I know we have the report, but there's only so much, you're going to learn and the feedback from just me or another commissioner being up here. So we're hoping we can schedule that workshop in the spring or summer before the annual budget is due, and just find out what you guys have in mind. And that's pretty much what we're doing. And like I say, it's we're a really solid working group, and we have new ideas, new people. I noticed in one of the reports they were talking about looking at bike safety and that, and one of our new adjunct folks is really into bike safety. So I'm hoping to get her to a council meeting sometime to do the report so she can elaborate on that and get our bike community status. I can't remember what you call it, where you get a little sign that you're a bike community, get that all re-going again. So a lot of things in the works. Any questions?
No, great work as always.
All the questions will come at the workshop. Oh,
Well,
there's a question.
I think that'd be really cool to have a historical photo, some old golfer photos for that entry, and especially by the pro shop. You said you couldn't find any, but could we maybe get a message out to the public if you have historical golf photos to
Well,
contact you
I
or?
think Ross Schneidmiller is pretty much the keeper of all things historical.
Oh.
And there was a lot of swimming and bathing and
Yeah.
carnivals back then, but
Right, right.
I don't know. Well, we'll have to see. There's some other things that that Ross brought up about kind of like a wrap of a car, but like a vinyl thing that goes on a wall. And maybe we could do a historical thing on the connecting hall between the two, so we could use that and also there's just a lot of possibilities, but we very specifically asked, and I don't think we're gonna find golf because there wasn't a course back in the old days. I think the first course, he told me, I was paying attention in class, was maybe in the 60s. Does that sound right for a Liberty Lake golf course? So. But I feel you, because going into the pro shop, I know they would probably
Be
like
fun.
golf pictures.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thanks for
Okay.
coming.
Thanks.
All right, next up, Liberty Lake Water and Sewer District. Sewer and Water District. I always say that in the wrong order, I guess, because I like water better than
Yeah,
sewer.
exactly. Don't we all? Hi, Kratim Nataraj and Liberty Lake Sewer and Water District. I think, we say sewer first.
Yeah.
So all right. I only have one thing today and happy to answer any questions. Just want to talk really quickly about pipes freezing. I know winter seems like it's over. My wife assures me that there's one more cold spell coming. So just for future reference, we do provide meter blankets, that they go in the meter box, and they can help to keep it a little bit warmer, to keep the ground temperature as opposed to the air temperature coming down. So if anybody, for citizens or whatever goes in the minutes, if any citizens want that, it's provided free by the district. They can even put them in if someone's uncomfortable getting into their meter box. They can come and put it in for you. And the other thing I would say is just remind everyone that the private system starts on the owner's side of the meter box. So we own to the meter box and the meter itself, and that's the public system, whatever's in the street. And then everybody else is responsible from that meter box onto your property. So if you have a frozen pipe and it's not out in the street, it's the homeowner's responsibility. I know that's tough, but that's kind of how it works. And everyone's got to kind of be responsible for their own. And I would also say that we have found, although we've actually, I think, gotten rid of all the problems in our 100-plus-year-old house, although I'm hearing there's some in the newer houses, if it's going to get really cold, open up your cabinets and turn the water on dripping a little bit. And that's really the best prevention for a frozen pipe. So that's all I really have, is just the pipe freezing thing. We had some issues here in the city with some frozen pipes when we had that cold spell, but.
Anybody have any questions?
All right.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, yeah.
Appreciate it. All right, so before we go on to general business, so we've got no connection with Rose, huh?
None.
Okay, real quick, then it would be great if we would have a motion to move the 7A and now 11A to a future meeting when we can reschedule with Rose.
Mayor, I make a motion to move item 7A and item 11A to the next council meeting,
Can we do a future meeting?
a future meeting, I beg
Thanks.
your pardon.
Second, thank you. Yes, we don't know what the availability is. Any questions, discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? All right, motion passes 6-0. Thank you very much for that. So we are on to consent agenda.
Mayor, make a motion to approve consent agenda items 10A, B, and C.
Second.
Dueling seconds. All right, thanks. We have a motion and a second by Councilmember Kurtz. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes 6-0. We have confirmed our consent agenda. All right, so we don't have any action items. Okay, council comments. Anybody have anything to add besides, before we go through our workshop schedule?
Oh, I
Go
just
ahead.
have a question.
Yes.
Has there been any bites for the Public Works Director or?
So they both posted today.
Oh.
And so we've hired individuals for both. No, I'm kidding. They posted today, so we should start getting nibbles starting, I would guess, later in the week, and we'll
Oh.
let you know at the next meeting.
Okay, just curious.
Anybody else? And actually, Mark, just real quick, and I should have asked this during your report. And I know I missed a meeting because I was somewhere else. Have you talked about what we're working on for the council retreat workshop?
Not because no, because we didn't have details
Okay.
until today, and we can certainly cover that when we
Okay,
get here.
perfect.
It would be a perfect time to
Okay.
go over those, yeah.
Sounds good. All right, public hearings and appeals, we have none, no resolutions, no ordinances, no emergency ordinances. Introduction of upcoming agenda items. So you guys have your list in front of you. So we've got, for today, reviewing, updating city council rules of procedure, we'll set up a follow-up to that. We've moved the city council committees. We have the joint workshop with community engagement on the 5th. Since we're moving the council committees to the 5th, it depends on what our timing is. We'll see if we can put both of these on here, but we'll see if we can keep the code of ethics, social media on the 5th. And then the proposed transparency ordinance. So depending on what the rest of that agenda looks like, depending on how heavy it is, maybe we'll try to get those in. But then again, we also have, hopefully we'll have Visit Spokane and GSI. So we'll scrub the list for March 5th and try to not make it too heavy, but we still need to move some of these things forward. We have aquifer protection, a couple things from Lisa for March 19th and the 7th. The TBDs below, we've got flock safety workshop. I think, is that finished? That
So.
was with regards to the HOAs, right?
Yeah, so my question at this point is that we've kind of made the recommendation that through the budget process, we would annually come back with recommendations as to where to strategically deploy those based upon I'll call them hotspots, based on the analysis
Right.
that PD is working with. And so instead of having a specific conversation where we're talking about targeting locations, we would propose to do that through the budget process as we're proposing funding for adding new cameras, and that would be the recommendation.
Councilmember Kennedy, your name was on there. Are you okay with that? Oh, sorry, no, it wasn't. It was Mayor Pro Tem Foyer. You guys look so much alike. All right, so if there's no objections, then we will move that one. Okay, police patrol and HOA, I think we went through that. Is there any required follow-up? That one's yours.
Yeah, that was mine. What I'd like to do is change that to like in the second quarter.
Okay,
It was not a huge priority, and some individuals have contacted me on that.
Okay.
I've given them questions to work out among
Perfect.
themselves.
okay. Review library funding. We've got that scheduled for March 19th. We need to move that up above. Commission appointment process, Councilmember Cargill, you still have that. We're obviously not going to squeeze it into February or March.
Yeah, that's not time sensitive.
Okay. All right, comprehensive plan work program, that's Lisa, so we'll look to her for a date for that one. Proclamation guidelines, that's mine again, not time sensitive. I'll leave that in second quarter. North side of the river, Councilmember Cargill, what are you thinking about on that?
It's north side of the river keeps coming up. I don't believe it's time sensitive. I just need to go back and review the meeting where the citizen brought it up.
Okay.
Because I can't even remember what it was now.
Well,
Like a year and a half
it wasn't a citizen that brought it forward in a meeting. It was a packet that we were sent by this individual.
Oh, that's
all
right.
directly.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. I will
Go back
find
and
it.
read that, reread that. Okay. Policy oversight, Councilmember Spencer, I know Mark and I have touched on that a little bit. We'll follow up a little bit more on Friday. I think it's actually a pretty short conversation once we pull all of the information together that we want to present. So we will get
Yep.
that in there. Review of the comprehensive review of ordinances. We had talked about, at least Mark and I have, about maybe trying to put together a citizen committee to start going through those. Citizens who are engaged and know kind of what's going on. So maybe people who've been through the Citizen Academy who want to remain involved. So we'll get that back on one of the future agendas for a short workshop, because I think if we get some really dedicated individuals to start going through those, Kelsey has the most recent list of everything that's active. Because I know if you go to the website, you'll hit some that are pretty old. They were probably superseded by something else. So Kelsey has the most current up-to-date list. So that was kind of a recommendation that Mark and I were looking at. So we'd like to bring that back. And then Mayor Pro Tem, you had libraries, the old library space, the future of the old library space. So second quarter.
No, Mike.
Okay.
Mike. Mike.
Yep. And then workshop each year with Parks and Arts. Let's kind of keep that on the radar. Councilmember Kennedy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Can I get a little more explanation on the review of ordinances, comprehensive review of ordinances?
Yeah,
Did I hear you say that the idea is to have different committees look at the ordinances?
We're talking about the possibility of putting a citizen committee together to start going through them. And some of them may just be word cleanups. Some of them that are still in effect from when the city started that may be outdated. And then come back with recommendations. But again, we would be looking for people who have knowledge of how the city works, maybe the Citizen Academy graduates, not somebody who's just looking to spend some time, somebody who can be very invested in going through those ordinances and giving them a first pass at what we might want to tackle first with any updates. And if there's some that don't need to be updated, fine too, unless you guys want to put together a subcommittee to do it. So those are kind of the thoughts. So we'll bring that back.
Bring that back for
Yeah, we
discussion.
will. Yeah.
Thank you.
One quick item. I know this seems like a long ways away, but it's not. Spring break coincides with our April 2nd meeting.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if, for what we did last year, if we should cancel that and reschedule or just cancel. I think last year we just canceled. I don't know. that
I
we
think we
rescheduled.
did,
So-
and then we ended up getting backed up a
Yeah.
little bit. Let me flip screens
You're
here.
talking
and
about
get the
spring break
calendar.
for kids.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, April 2nd.
Okay, so April
What?
2nd. Well, so fortunately this April is one that has 5 Tuesdays.
Right.
So
right.
let's everybody, if everybody wants to look at their calendar, see if we might want to consider moving the first meeting from the 2nd to the 9th. And even if you guys want to maybe even think about moving the second one to the 23rd, that still gives us a week in between. So think about that, look at your calendars.
Yeah.
And then we can make the decision at the next meeting. You guys can make the decision next meeting. That sound good? All right. All right. Anybody else, anything else to add to our workshop list? It's growing.
So if we want to address
Yes.
the other issue, we had some discussion earlier on, probably late last year, about, especially now that we have 2 new council members, breaking off and doing like a retreat style, just kind of governance session. And so we thought in order to do that with maximum effectiveness, we needed to facilitate that with a professional. And so it took us a little bit of time to kind of go through the market and find a group of people, several groups of people that provided that service and interview them and go through some pricing and some kind of scoping. And so we've done that, and we feel we have a solution that will work not only for us price wise, but will yield the best outcome. And so we're going to get together with them. We signed a professional services agreement with them. And so we're going to get together with them and have kind of a kickoff to discuss how that's actually going to be carried out. And so one of the nice things about the scope of work that we've finalized is it comes with an hour individual interview with this professional firm and each council member before we get together as a group. All of the other proposals did not include that. So we felt that was an important component of this. So they heard from individuals and then heard from the body as a whole as we were working in that call it retreat style gathering, talking about governance. So look for that to occur sometime in the latter half of March, early April, realizing that spring break is out there. We don't have a deadline, so this is not particularly time sensitive, but we want to get it done as soon as we can so that it still remains kind of practical and effective. And so look for the information to start coming out after we have a chance to get together and have that kickoff meeting. I want to say in a couple of weeks, whenever that's scheduled. But look for that information to start being distributed at that point.
Was the funding for that in our budget?
Not directly. There was no earmarked, there was no allocated funding specifically for that purpose. But we have funding sources that for whatever reason, those
Right.
things don't materialize. And so we've cobbled some of that together to make sure that we prioritize.
We have
those.
done that in the
Yes,
past.
Yes.
absolutely.
Successfully.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else?
I have a question for Mark on retreat. Is that like a day or a weekend or?
A week.
We'll go away for a week,
Yeah.
yeah.
Great.
No, so we.
In Hawaii.
Yeah, right.
We go to Cheney.
So we believe the maximum of effectiveness for something like this is half day. So
Oh.
the meeting where the body is together for the retreat would be no more than 4 hours.
Oh, okay. Darn, we're not going to Hawaii then.
No. And we can get partway there and turn back. Well, in the past, we've have our strategic plan retreats and we have council priority retreats. But I remember back when I started and Wendy was mayor at the time, and I think one of the best retreats, I think in all these years that I've been part of was one where we literally, I think we got some chairs and put them in a circle and we just got to know each other. So that was kind of a little bit of the emphasis behind this, but trying to get to know each other. What do we have in common? How do we tick? What makes us think the way we do? And so that was kind of what started some of this. And then, of course, Mark's taken it and run with it with some other stuff. So I think it'll be really good for the team. And I look forward to actually maybe even doing something similar at some point with some of the staff. All right. Okay, no executives, where are we? Hold on. Yeah, I got ahead of myself. Hold on, citizen comments. So if there's anybody here in chambers who'd like to make a comment, again, we have our yellow sheets and we'll check in online to see if anybody on Zoom has a citizen comment. And if you do, just please send a message to our meeting host in the chat. Okay, sounds like we don't have any. So if there's any further business, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thanks, everybody.